I chose a chocolate cake for Emily since you like chocolate, don't you? Mom, if you eat that, you'll die. My daughter Jennifer quickly swapped my cake with Bob's. I hesitantly took a bite. Jennifer began to eat her cake too. As Bob bragged about how he had reserved this cake a month in advance and how delicious the crushed nuts on top were, he suddenly began to choke. Bob's face turned bright red, he struggled to breathe, started foaming at the mouth, shivered, and then collapsed to the floor. My name is Emily. I'm 36 and work for a food inspection company. I live with my husband, who is 2 years older than me, and our 7-year-old daughter, Jennifer. I met Bob in a college club, and after we both got jobs, we started dating and got married 2 years later. The next year after our marriage, we had our daughter Jennifer. Jennifer was a late bloomer. She started walking when she was 2. We got her checked out at various hospitals, but they found no abnormalities. Every hospital said that it was just individual differences and suggested waiting to see how she progresses. At first, Bob was extremely worried. However, he became frustrated with Jennifer's delays in speaking and walking and began to ignore her. My mother-in-law Diane always disliked Jennifer, assuming she had a disability, and never held her. Only my father-in-law was affectionate to her, often telling me with a smile how unique and wonderful she was. It made me really happy. Bob had been very kind until we got married, but with Jennifer's issues, he was always grumpy at home. If something didn't go his way, he would slam the table or stomp loudly on the floor, always making a loud noise. Every time he did that, I'd get scared and shrink back. Bob's behavior stressed me out, causing hormonal imbalances, leading to menopause, and I couldn't have any more children. I remember sobbing with my head buried in the pillow. After that, Bob became even harsher towards me, constantly nitpicking at the way I cleaned, the taste of my cooking, even the way I folded laundry. Every complaint was accompanied by a loud slap on the table or a rough placement of a cup, making me constantly jumpy and apologetic. But Jennifer would just watch Bob's tantrums with a puzzled expression, never seeming to be scared or crying. Bob looked at Jennifer as if she were something strange. Jennifer didn't speak much, but she learned to read quickly and was always engrossed in books. She could focus on her reading for hours. By the time she was in preschool, she was not just reading picture books, but also encyclopedias and children's books. I believe she understood quite a bit of complex words. When Jennifer was about to start elementary school, they suggested placing her in a special education class because of her lack of speech. When I talked to Bob about this, he was furious. Are you kidding me? Why is my child in a special needs class? Bob slammed his glass onto the table. I could only flinch and shrug. You better fix this. I won't accept this kind of bad reputation, he said. Bob stormed off to the bedroom, his footsteps heavy on the floor. As I held my head in my hands, Jennifer gently patted my back with her tiny hands. Thank you. I hugged Jennifer tightly as tears streamed down my face. Jennifer, it's not your fault. The next day Diane called. Are you really going to let my granddaughter attend that kind of class? If the neighbors find out, I won't be able to walk outside from embarrassment. And it will all be your fault. Diane said what she wanted to say and hung up the phone. Neither Bob nor Diane seemed to genuinely care about Jennifer. It was all about how they were perceived by others. After consulting with local counselors, school teachers, and municipal officers, it was decided that Jennifer would attend regular classes instead of the special needs class. I felt that the students, parents, and teachers in the special needs class were all wonderful and thought it might be a better fit for Jennifer. But I couldn't even suggest it, seeing the evident objection from Bob and Diane. When Jennifer started elementary school and I had some free time, the temp agency I worked for offered me a permanent position. The job was fun and fulfilling. It felt good to be needed and relied upon, especially compared to the stifling atmosphere at home. I decided to discuss this with Bob. As expected, Bob was hesitant. They offered me a permanent position at my current job. I really want to work full-time. Bob looked down at me with crossed arms. Make sure you take care of the house just like before, or even better. But I'm gonna need some help from you too. Bob turned away and banged the table. Housework is your job. Are you seriously asking me? After a brief pause, Bob smirked. Got it. I'll ask my mom. She can help with the house chores. I was shocked. I couldn't believe Diane, with whom I always had issues, was coming to our house. Would I be able to stand it? Eventually, Bob gave Diane his spare key, and she started dropping by our place every other day. Whenever Diane was at our house, she always made sarcastic remarks. This place is a mess. Poor Bob has to live like this. How on earth were you raised to clean like this? Because of Diane's frequent visits, I started being even more meticulous with my house chores. Yet she would nitpick and complain about the smallest things. I put up with this bullying for weeks, but finally I couldn't take it anymore. I told Diane that I was taking care of the house properly and that she didn't need to come over. Reluctantly, Diane agreed and stopped visiting. But just when I breathed a sigh of relief, Bob started spending more time at his parents' house. Bob had always loved his childhood home and would return there often, but the frequency of his visits increased. A little while later, when Jennifer was in 2nd grade, my father-in-law, who had always been so full of life, suddenly passed away. My father-in-law was the only one who was ever kind to Jennifer. What struck me as odd at the funeral was seeing Bob and Diane occasionally glance at each other and laugh. Weren't they sad? I never got the impression that Diane and my father-in-law were close, though. Seeing the main mourner laughing at a funeral seemed out of place. With my father-in-law gone, Jennifer lost the only ally she had. I was filled with unease. Juggling housework, childcare, and a full-time job had worn me out, and I fell sick with a fever. While Bob was hanging out at his family home, I called him, asking if he could help with dinner, but he flatly refused. My mom never asked my dad to do anything even when she was sick. I don't want to catch a cold from you. I'm gonna stay at my folks' for a bit, Bob said, and then hung up. Bob didn't come home for a whole week after that. As I started to feel better and work got busier, my promotion began to come up. I was offered a position as a section manager. I was thrilled, but considering my responsibilities at home, it felt like a heavy burden. I talked to Bob, but as expected, he insisted I keep up with the household duties. Moreover, Bob gave me a condescending look. Really? Do you think you can handle a position like section manager? That's the same rank as me, you know? Bob suddenly got up from his seat and headed to the bedroom. The next day, Diane came over to the house. Bob was complaining, you know. He said the house is a mess because you don't put effort into housework. Diane quickly entered the house and began inspecting everything. The way the windows were wiped, how the laundry was folded, the water stains in the bathroom. I was made to redo all of these tasks. Every time Diane came over and started nagging at me, Jennifer started talking to Diane. Jennifer approached Diane with a serious look on her face and asked, Granny, what do you think are the 4 main elements of happiness? Do you know what happiness hormones are? Taken aback by Jennifer's rapid-fire questions, Diane paused before answering. Diane looked puzzled. It must have been a while since Diane had heard Jennifer's voice. Can you talk normally? Diane asked, still confused. Answer my question from earlier. Diane was probably clueless about the question. She tilted her head in confusion. Oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins, Diane repeated, trying to understand. They're neurotransmitters, mainly secreted from the pituitary gland in the brain. Lately, Jennifer had been reading a lot of medical books. While taken aback, Diane listened to Jennifer's explanations. Jennifer continued to passionately talk about the connection between neurotransmitters and diseases, as well as substances that induce sleep. Diane, overwhelmed by Jennifer's focus, left the house exhausted. Thankfully, I was spared any nagging that day. On my birthday, Bob, returning from a business trip, brought a birthday cake. It was the first time he had ever bought something for me since we got married. Even though he gave Diane souvenirs every time he went on a business trip and gifted her designer scarves, wallets, and bags on her birthday, he had never bought anything for Jennifer and me. I was stunned, trying to figure out what had gotten into Bob this time. Seeing me in shock, Bob held up the cake box and said, "Thanks for everything. I love you. I'm gonna put this in the fridge. Let's eat it later." Bob's overly sweet tone gave me goosebumps. Jennifer, seemingly displeased with something, took a bottle of mineral water from the fridge gave the cake a quick glance and went to her room. Jennifer stayed in her room, so Bob and I ate dinner first. Throughout the meal, Bob showered me with cringe-worthy compliments. You know, I always leave the housework up to you. I'm sorry about that. I'm gonna help out more from now on. Thanks. Although I found his words uncomfortable, I just nodded along, not wanting to upset him. After dinner, as I was cleaning up, Bob took out the cake box from the fridge. I was about to set plates and get a knife, when Bob gestured for me to sit. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Bob dished out the cake and brought it to the table. Honestly, I found his actions a bit creepy. I got chocolate cake, Emily's favorite. You like chocolate, don't you? Bob asked, trying to make conversation. I couldn't stand being alone with him any longer, so I decided to fetch Jennifer. I'll go call Jennifer. Just wait here, I said and hurried to her room. Jennifer was on my old computer, seemingly searching for something. Mom, you shouldn't eat that cake, Jennifer said, looking at me with concern. Why? What do you mean? I asked, confused. Just trust me right now, Jennifer replied. I decided to trust her. Jennifer took my hand and led me back to the dining room. Shall we dig in? I asked. Hey, we don't have any forks, I said, heading to the kitchen. But Jennifer stopped me, gripping my clothes tightly. Oh, my bad. I'll get them, Bob said cheerfully, rising from the table. That's when Jennifer whispered urgently to me, Mom, if you eat that, you're going to die. Quickly, Jennifer switched mine and Bob's slices of cake. Bob, coming back with a fork, began eating the cake in front of us. It's delicious, Emily. It's made by a famous pastry chef, you know, he said. Hesitantly, I took a bite of the cake. Jennifer started eating hers too. As Bob proudly rambled about reserving the cake a month in advance and how the crushed nuts on top were delicious, he suddenly began to choke. Bob's face quickly turned red. His breathing grew labored. He started to foam at the mouth and then he collapsed onto the floor. It looked like an anaphylactic shock from an allergy. Both Bob and I have buckwheat allergies, but there was no way the cake we were eating contained any. I froze in shock and confusion. Jennifer spoke to me with a calm voice. Mom, call 911, she said, handing me her phone. Snapping back to reality, I called the ambulance. Jennifer turned Bob to his side and urged me to hit him hard on the back. Doing as instructed, Bob spit out the cake he had eaten. His breathing seemed a little easier after that. Bob was semi-conscious, murmuring buckwheat, buckwheat. Even in the ambulance, he kept mumbling the same, and an EMT told me to sit next to him for comfort. I did as I was told and sat beside Bob. After receiving treatment at the hospital, Bob was out of danger. For precaution, he was kept for a few days. I wondered how Jennifer knew something life-threatening was going to happen. I returned home after completing the hospital admission procedures, all the while pondering the mystery. Jennifer showed me a wrapper she pulled out from the trash. Look, Dad threw this in the kitchen trash, she said. It was a wrapper from buckwheat cookies, Jennifer continued. The cake box Dad brought home had a sticker half peeled off. I checked the kitchen trash and found an unfamiliar wrapper, so I looked it up online. I discovered that the cookies contained buckwheat flour, and warned me about it. I still can't believe that the crushed nuts on the cake were actually crumbled buckwheat cookies. I recalled Jennifer's warning, Mom, if you eat that you're gonna die, and shuddered. If Jennifer hadn't been so quick-witted back then, it would have been me eating the dangerous cake. It would have been me eating that cake right now. The thought of me lying in a hospital bed taken by an ambulance sent chills down my spine. Did Bob really tamper with the cake, intending to take my life? I pulled out my phone, ready to make a call. I need to tell the police right away. I think you should reconsider. I jumped in surprise at Jennifer's voice. Why? Jennifer began to explain calmly. Dad's the one who collapsed. If you report it, the police might suspect you. A sense of dread clouded my vision. She was right. Going to the police might only make me a prime suspect. I felt an overwhelming sense of despair, wondering what to do. Don't worry, Mom. I'll handle it, Jennifer reassured me. She went into Bob's study and began to search for something. Bob had always told me not to go in without permission, and I had rarely ever entered. Jennifer started rummaging through a drawer and flipping through a notebook. Dad's always been meticulous. He must have written something down, she said. She stopped and showed me a page from the notebook. It was a revelation. My father-in-law had been a victim in a similar way. The note detailed how to mix crushed buckwheat cookies into seasoning. What was even more shocking was that Diane was involved in this sinister plan. They were conspiring together. At the bottom of the page it read, "Next Emily's birthday." I clenched the notebook tightly in my hands. "It's okay, that's why," Jennifer said, her voice strained as she tried to comfort me. In that moment, I realized I was shaking more from anger than fear. After what he did to my father-in-law, he was after my life. I made a vow deep within. I would never forgive Bob and Diane. With determination in my heart, I spoke to Jennifer. "Hey, this notebook could be used as evidence, right?" Jennifer shook her head sadly. "I wish, but probably not," she continued. "If they claim it's just a figment of their imagination, we've got nothing. And as for Grandpa, there's no way to prove anything now." I hung my head deep in thought. You're right. Without concrete evidence, they can weasel out of it. Jennifer gripped my hand tightly. "I'll find the evidence. I promise I'm gonna protect you. We'll send those two to prison." Encouraged by Jennifer's words, I nodded with determination and squeezed her hand in return. If they want to fight, we'll give them one. For Jennifer and for my own sake, I was resolved to protect my life and avenge my father-in-law. Jennifer and I swore to take revenge on Bob and Diane. We started preparing for our final confrontation. The first step was to lure them into our house. I asked Diane to tell me Bob's favorite dishes since I wanted to cook for him when he got out of the hospital. Without any suspicion, Diane came over. I didn't want to be with Diane for even a second, but I held my tongue and learned her recipes in the kitchen. Meanwhile, Jennifer went through Diane's purse and found the buckwheat cookies. Swiftly, Jennifer took just one of them. The next day, I brought the buckwheat cookie to work and requested a composition test. Who would have thought that working in a food inspecting company would come in handy at a time like this? A few days later, Bob was discharged from the hospital. I told Diane that I was preparing a special dinner for him and asked her to pick him up. While waiting for Bob to come home, Jennifer and I prepared a table filled with his favorite dishes. By the time the dinner preparations were finished, Bob and Diane had returned home. Jennifer went to the front door to greet them. Holding Bob's bags, she guided them to the dining table. My mother and I made today's dishes taught by my grandmother. Bob, pleased, took his seat and began eating. Diane also seemed to enjoy her meal. After a while, puzzled expressions formed on their faces. "Hey Mom, look at that!" Bob whispered to Diane, gesturing subtly. "Oh my God!" Diane exclaimed, staring at something on the table, her eyes widening in shock. She even dropped the fried chicken she was holding with her fork, but didn't seem to notice. Bob and Diane stopped eating. Trying to lighten the mood, I asked Bob, "Is the seasoning all right? I guess I can't make it quite like your mother did." They both looked down and said, "No, it's not that. It's delicious." I beamed a big smile at them. "This seasoning isn't just tasty. It seems to be quite invigorating too. My father-in-law had told me about it a while ago," I mentioned. Bob and Diane began to shiver as if cold. I continued to smile unfazed. "Jennifer, sprinkle some of this seasoning on their food." As Jennifer reached for the seasoning, I stopped her. "Don't put that unknown stuff on it," Bob said, shaking off her hand with a fierce look. "What's got you so spooked?" I asked with a broad grin. "I just wanted you and your mother to live a long life," I said. "Just stop it, please." Diane covered her ears and screamed. "Why? You wanted me to be healthy too, didn't you? That's why you sprinkled that stuff on the cake. In the end, you ate it yourself and ended up in the hospital." I handed a set of documents to the two of them, who looked utterly shocked. I had our company's inspector check the contents. What was on the cake? And the buckwheat cookies had matching ingredients. Bob and Diane exchanged glances confronted with the evidence. "What are you talking about?" "I have no idea about any of that. The ingredients in the buckwheat cookies Diane had and the ones you threw away in our trash are from the same product. Do you think it's okay to just go through someone's belongings? Those cookies were a gift from a friend during their travels." Calmly, I placed a copy of Bob's notebook on the table. "Then what's this note about ordering cookies online?" The notebook detailed the manufacturer, product name, shipping date, price, and more. Bob and Diane's faces turned from red to blue. It also says here that in small amounts it wouldn't be detected if someone were to induce vomiting. I stared intently at Diane. Is this related to my father-in-law's cause of death? Bob, looking defeated, began to speak. Dad was in our way. Maybe he didn't like that my mom and I were close. He was always butting in and being a nuisance. He constantly lectured Bob and me, saying things like our relationship isn't normal. I couldn't stand it. We mixed those buckwheat cookies into the seasoning and made him eat it. It was merely concern for an unusually close mother-son relationship that had troubled my father-in-law. Yet Bob and Diane seemed to have taken it personally. Their justifications were incredibly selfish. I couldn't help but pity my father-in-law, who lost his life trying to foster a better family environment. So since it worked on my father-in-law, you tried the same method on me? That's right. You have the same buckwheat allergy as me and my dad. You're in our way too. My disbelief turned into sheer astonishment. What you two did is a crime. I'm going to call the police right now and submit this evidence. Suddenly, Bob stood up, snatched the copied notebook from the table, crumpled it, and forced it into his mouth, swallowing it whole. Diane, Jennifer, and I watched in shock. There you go. No more evidence, Bob said with a smug expression. The police will just think it's some crazy story from Emily, my wife. Bob looked down at Jennifer and me with a smug expression. Dad, that's a copy. The real one is somewhere else, Jennifer calmly stated. Then she placed the voice recorder on the table. You can't deny it anymore, she said. From the beginning, Jennifer had secretly recorded their conversation with a voice recorder hidden under the table. Damn, it's over, Bob muttered, collapsing weakly into his chair. We are so close. Just a bit more, and the obstacle would have been gone. With both hands, Diane seemed unable to contain her anger as she slammed the table. You guys really thought this plan would work, huh? Jennifer remarked with a hint of disbelief. Regardless of the plan, I'm going to protect Mom no matter what. I chimed in as I pulled out my smartphone. I'm calling the police. Admit your wrongdoing and make amends. It's the least you can do to honor my father-in-law. As I began to dial, both Bob and Diane suddenly tried to apologize to me. Please don't call the cops. We're really sorry, Bob begged. Yes, forgive us. They kept apologizing to me. Jennifer suddenly began to explain how their plan went wrong. Dad's a total mama's boy, so a perfect crime was never gonna work. Too many obvious mistakes. If it were me, I quickly covered Jennifer's mouth. Jennifer, use that knowledge wisely, okay? My eyes locked to her. Jennifer nodded in agreement. Yeah, I got it. I won't get involved with people like this anymore. Also, I have something to inform Mom later. I hugged Jennifer tightly. Yeah, I got it. From now on, let's live peacefully together. When the police came to arrest Bob and Diane, they cried and screamed, making it difficult for the officers. The copied notes, voice recording, and purchase history of buckwheat cookies found on Bob's computer became evidence that led to their conviction, including the matter regarding my father-in-law. After the arrest, by the time Bob was charged, my divorce from him was finalized. We proceeded with the division of property between me and Bob. Diane ended up selling her family home to cover lawyer costs. Bob, having no income to pay child support, used the money from the sale of his house for it. This left Bob and Diane with nowhere to go once they were released. I have set up a memorial for my father-in-law. I wanted to properly pay my respects. After the verdict for Bob and Diane was announced, Jennifer and I reported the incident at my father-in-law's gravesite. I'm sure he'd be pleased from up in heaven, I said. After the incident, Jennifer showed me a piece of paper. This is what I said I'd tell you. It was an IQ test result. I was taken aback and had to double-check when I saw it. It says 135 here. My IQ is 135. I was genuinely surprised. I believe anything over 130 is considered gifted. I'm sorry, Mom. I took the test without telling you, and even used your credit card without permission. I was once again surprised by what Jennifer could do. Later on, Jennifer transferred to a school that caters to gifted children. Jennifer, as usual, had difficulty communicating and didn't talk to anyone, but she really liked the environment where no one minded and she could study whatever interested her, and she attended happily. Living with just Jennifer had been joyful, my work had been fulfilling, and life had been rewarding. Perhaps it was because I had been full of life and my complexion had improved, but I had been frequently told I looked younger. Ever since we began living just the two of us, Jennifer started hugging me more often. When she did this, it released a lot of the happy hormone oxytocin, she would say. I was still not exactly sure where oxytocin came from, but it surely made me feel happy. And to my delight, my menstrual cycle returned. Maybe it was thanks to this happy hormone Jennifer mentioned. From here on out, I was going to live with Jennifer, keeping our smiles bright. Marriage is like a graveyard, isn't it? It was supposed to be my big day, my wedding. Yet, out of the blue, my mother-in-law Linda started spewing ridiculous things. To make matters worse, she laughed arrogantly and threw water on my wedding dress. The atmosphere for the rest of the ceremony felt like a funeral, completely dampening the celebratory mood. The folks from William's family just stood there, snickering and watching the scene, without stopping Linda. A year after that hellish wedding, I got my chance for revenge. My sister-in-law was getting hitched. Would you believe it? The date of her wedding was the same as mine. I was thinking of giving her a taste of her own medicine with that life's graveyard comment. My name is Mary. I am a newlywed in my early 30s. I had registered our marriage when I was 30, but the wedding was planned for 2 years later, once we had saved enough money. My husband, William, didn't seem too interested in me. Whenever I tried to talk to him, all I got was, yeah. So even when I had something I wanted to discuss, he wouldn't listen. For 2 years, I had to tolerate something. It was the harassment from William's family. Is it meat pie again today? Didn't you have a meat pie just last week? If you keep eating only meat pie, aren't you going to lack proper nutrition? You should cook more balanced meals. It's not fair to our son. Linda, my mother-in-law, would come over daily to inspect my meals. She never came in the morning, perhaps because William was around, but she always showed up around lunchtime. I started living with William 2 years ago, and since then, Linda has been visiting every day. The reason? Our houses are incredibly close. Our place and Linda's are just a stone's throw away, about 50 yards apart. Many might be wary of living so close to their in-laws and anticipating issues, but I was completely fooled by Linda. Before our wedding, she was so sweet, always saying, "If you ever need anything, just let me know." Indeed, when I discussed issues about William, she would respond, "That's not okay. I'll talk to him about it." She always seemed to care. That's why I thought living nearby wouldn't be a problem. But when real life kicked in, Linda turned out to be a stereotypical meddling mother-in-law. It wasn't just about the food. She would nitpick on how I cleaned the house, placed dishes, and all the minor things. At first I thought, well, she's the elder and complied with her requests. But when I mentioned this to friends, they were like, "That's not right. She's totally bullying you. She's nitpicking for no reason, just to annoy you." I hadn't known that bullying by a mother-in-law really happened until then, so I decided to look it up online. When I did, I found stories that mirrored what I was going through with Linda. So this is what they call bullying by a mother-in-law? That's what I thought. I decided to no longer take everything Linda said to heart. This dish isn't good. It needs to be less salty. No, William's job is physically demanding, so he needs a bit more salt. He loses minerals when he sweats. The moment I decided not to let Linda dictate everything was the first time I think I ever talked back to her. After that, maybe she didn't like my attitude and she started visiting less frequently. Now in our second year of marriage, we were set to visit my in-laws for Thanksgiving Day. Since Linda's visits had become infrequent, I thought it would be good to show our faces. Being the holidays, my sister-in-law was also home. She had been living with her boyfriend since college, coming home only during extended breaks, making her visits special. But this holiday was different. There was a growing animosity towards my sister-in-law. For some reason, William had to work during the holiday, so he would be joining us later in the evening. I received a call from Linda telling me to come early and prepare the meal. So I went shopping at the grocery store and market early in the morning and arrived at the in-laws' house around noon. Upon arrival, my sister-in-law was already there, sitting at the table with my father-in-law and Linda. I assumed they were having lunch, and when I looked, there was clearly some expensive sushi. "Oh, you're early. There's none for you, so you better start preparing dinner. And it better be better than this sushi. Come on, Mom, don't be so hard on her. But please make a nice meal." My sister-in-law's makeup was heavier than before and she got her nails done. I knew. She had a job, and I wondered if those nails were suitable for doing daily chores. It was clear that Linda and my sister-in-law intended to annoy me, but I didn't care since I had eaten a delicious poke bowl during my shopping trip. I did as I was told and started cooking, but then I overheard them saying, "Isn't she super unfriendly?" She's always been like that. William should have married someone cuter. Well, at least the makeup helps a bit. The three of them were speaking their minds. I was a bit hurt, but I couldn't let them see that. If I showed them I was upset, it would just make them happier. By evening, when William arrived, for some reason, there were barbecue platters on the table. I made dinner just as I was told. "Why are these here?" I asked, to which I got the response, "Did you really cook anything? You came in the evening and didn't do anything. What's this supposed to prove?" Roast chicken, salads, and a beef stew that had been simmering for hours should have been in the fridge. I opened the fridge, but it was empty. "Hey, don't go rummaging through someone else's fridge." I realized I had been tricked. After I had finished cooking, I went back to our house to fetch something I had forgotten. I thought a few minutes would be fine, but I had underestimated them. I didn't know who did it, but I suspected it was Linda. Both my sister-in-law and father-in-law were smirking at me. They probably all knew Linda had thrown out my food. It was so frustrating. I never told William about the way I felt or the troubles with his family. Then, on our second wedding anniversary, we decided to have a wedding ceremony. Surprisingly, William seemed excited about the idea of a wedding, and he helped out with everything, from choosing the dress and venue to creating the guest list. Of course, his parents were on the invite list. I figured it was a wedding, so they wouldn't cause any trouble. Boy, was I wrong. On the wedding day, I regretted being so naive. The ceremony began with the gathering of attendees, and then it transitioned into the reception. After changing outfits, we headed to the venue. When I met William's gaze, he was staring intently at me. "Is there something on my face?" I asked. "Oh, I had to reapply my lipstick earlier. Is it smudged?" But he didn't respond. After a moment's thought, he whispered, "You look beautiful." I never expected to hear those words from him. In the 2 years since we married, and considering the 5 years since we started dating, William had never called me cute or beautiful. The only times he really made me feel special were when he confessed his feelings and proposed. I was distressed about his family's behavior, but that one sentence from William made me feel loved and appreciated. One sentence from William made me feel like the wedding would be a cherished memory. Then we started having dinner. Glancing over to where his family sat, everyone looked casual, but they seemed a bit loud. Those around them were constantly looking their way, and their laughter was audible even from where we were. It was unsettling, but I felt relieved when the staff intervened and they quieted down. Then it was time for the first dance. However, that's when things took a turn. We danced, and everyone at the place started dancing following us. And my in-laws reached us. I thought to myself, just keep a smile on, just for today. Thank you all for coming today. As I expressed my gratitude to them, Linda suddenly threw her drink towards me. I was taken aback, but the screams from those around me brought me back to reality. Looking down, I was drenched. Confusion swirling, Linda, laughing loudly, proclaimed, "Marriage is the graveyard of life, isn't it? Ever since they got married, my son has become so distant, and she doesn't even cook him decent meals. If this isn't a graveyard, then what is?" She continued, "Why are you doing this?" I asked, but she simply responded, "I feel sorry for my son." My sister-in-law and father-in-law standing next to her were also laughing. The whole hall was abuzz, with everyone unsure how to react when William suddenly spoke up. "Enough is enough," he said in a loud voice, which was unusual for the usually calm William. And I bet others hadn't either. They looked furious. "I've been patient enough. Leave now." Grabbing Linda's arm forcefully, he began dragging her out. "Ouch, ouch. Don't do that," Linda cried out, but was ignored and led outside the ceremony hall. My sister-in-law and father-in-law hurriedly followed. Concerned, I went after them, and outside I saw William sternly telling them, "I'm cutting ties with all of you. Don't ever interfere with Mary and me again." "Can we talk?" I asked. "Yeah, let's not let your emotions get the best of you," William replied, trying to calm down. Despite their collective pleas, William ignored them all. He shoved them into a cab and sent them home. I was dumbfounded by the scene, but William came over saying, "I'm really sorry. I didn't want our special day to end up like this." The reception couldn't continue in such an atmosphere, so it was cancelled. The guests were treated to sweets instead. Back in our private room, I honestly struggled to grasp the situation. Sure, the wedding being ruined was a shock, but I hadn't expected William to get so angry. "Why were you so mad?" I asked. "I thought you weren't that into me," I remarked. He looked a bit sad as he replied, "Can't blame you for thinking that. I'm just bad at expressing my feelings." As we talked more, it became clear he wasn't ignoring me. He was so smitten that he'd often get lost gazing at me and miss out on what was being said. He'd nod in response, just so it didn't seem like he wasn't listening. What? It was like that? I couldn't help but be shocked. Moreover, William was aware of the harassment from my in-laws. Seeing me not discuss the harassment, he'd occasionally warn his entire family about their behavior. I hadn't noticed any hint of this at all, but now that I think about it, there were times when the harassment seemed to stop. "I told you when I proposed that I love you, Mary. That's never gonna change. And I promised to make you happy." This isn't exactly happiness, though. That day we both cried until the morning. For the next year, William tried his best to ensure I didn't have to face any difficulties. Thanks to his efforts, my stress was reduced a bit, and knowing William was on my side gave me strength. However, the harassment from the in-laws didn't stop. Moreover, they'd target times when William wasn't home to come over to our place. If we didn't respond, they'd leave snarky letters in our mailbox. Even if I tried to avoid them, such days continued for a while. I was sad that the in-laws ruined our wedding, but I was happy that William had always been by my side. And for the first time, I realized how comforting it was to have just one person on my side. Since then, William seems to have kept his distance from his family, but they frequently try to get in touch. However, neither of us responded to them. Then there was news that William's sister, Lily, was getting married. The wedding was planned for a few months later, and without learning from the past, they sent us an invitation. Despite being frustrated with the insensitive sister, I came up with a plan. When I discussed this plan with William, he said, "Sounds good. People might talk, but remember, I'm always with you, Mary. Just let me know how I can help." Honestly, I was hesitant about executing the plan, but hearing that from William was reassuring. A few months later, I decided to execute the well-thought-out plan. We both attended Lily's lavish wedding, and I held on, waiting for the right moment to put my plan into action. I had given a DVD to the event staff beforehand, asking them to play it once I signaled them during the speeches. Lily had requested a speech from William, but when the time came, he didn't stand up. Seeing the staff flustered, I stepped up. "May I take his place?" Lily and her parents were taken aback, but the atmosphere didn't allow for them to say no. I opened up the prepared podium and stood in front of the microphone. "I'm truly happy for Lily's marriage. However, previously your family used to say marriage is a graveyard. What do you think about that? I never thought marriage was like that, but I never imagined you'd do something like that." As I raised my hand while speaking, an image was projected on the screen behind me. It was footage we had taken, thinking we'd watch our wedding ceremony later. The video showed Linda, my mother-in-law, pouring water during the dance, and my father-in-law and sister-in-law laughing at the scene. The nasty words of Linda could be heard as the audio played back. From this footage, maybe marriage really is a graveyard. Or perhaps getting involved with a family feels more like a graveyard. The next video showed my mother-in-law and sister-in-law harassing me. I secretly recorded it with my smartphone, thinking it might be useful someday. I never thought it would come in handy in this situation. My husband and I will cut ties with his family. I apologize for ruining the important wedding ceremony, but we wanted you all to know what kind of people they are. Excuse us, Ignoring my furious in-laws and sobbing sister-in-law, I left the venue. Outside, William, who had left as part of the plan, was waiting for me. "You did great. How about we go grab something tasty?" After eating, we headed home. The next day, we received numerous messages and calls from Linda and Lily, but we didn't respond. However, after countless calls, we decided to pick up once. On the other end, Linda was furious. "Where the heck are you right now? I went to your place, and some strangers are living there." It seems Linda came over to our house, realized we weren't there, and gave us a call. It was evident strangers would be there. After all, we had already moved out. William had suggested it when we planned to play the footage at my sister-in-law's wedding. Since we live close to our parents' place now, if we're going to cut ties, maybe we should move somewhere they won't find us. Knowing them, they'll probably come to our house. I totally agreed with William's idea. William had been considering changing jobs, and the timing seemed perfect. He started job hunting while I searched for a new place to live. Both the job change and the move went smoothly, and all that remained was to attend my sister-in-law's wedding. After achieving our revenge, we headed to our new home, where we had already moved our belongings. We hadn't told anyone we were moving, and the new place was so far away that you'd have to take a plane. We believed there's no chance the in-laws would visit. However, to be safe, we had asked our neighbors not to tell anyone our whereabouts. As expected, Linda tried asking around, but nobody spilled the beans. Even though I wasn't saying anything, Linda kept talking one-sidedly. "Are you listening? If you move, just say so. What are you going to do about us now?" Linda was referring to the monthly allowance we used to send. Both William and I had decent incomes, and we had been sending money to the in-laws every month. I knew at some point that they were using our money for fancy sushi. But since I hadn't discussed it with William, he continued to send them the allowance. But after this incident, I told William everything, and he decided not to send any more money. We had been giving them money even before we got married, but after our wedding, our combined income gave us some financial comfort. William had consulted with me about the in-laws facing financial difficulties. I had agreed to increase the amount and continue the monthly allowance even after our marriage. However, in reality, they weren't struggling at all. They just made us send money, so they could live lavishly. As the years went by, they saved less and could no longer live solely on their pension. In the end, it seemed they were relying solely on our allowance. Whether they realized its value after it was gone or whether they were genuinely struggling, they demanded, "Send us money and tell us your new address." We had no intention of telling them our address, let alone ever meeting them again. I hung up the phone from Linda without saying a word. After that, whether I blocked her number or not, she kept sending me messages to see how things were going. According to the messages, after Lily's wedding, her fiancé had apparently confronted her quite harshly. Lily's fiancé was what you would call well-off in general terms, and my in-laws were expecting some financial support from him. However, once he found out about the incident at my wedding, he was furious and demanded to know what had happened. Lily claimed it was all Linda's doing, but there was footage of Lily laughing along. The fiancé declared he couldn't marry someone like that, breaking off their engagement. Naturally, the talk of financial support also fell through. The flustered family was expecting some financial help from us, but since we found out that the money was being used for luxury, that plan failed. Lily, who had been living with her fiancé, was kicked out and now lives with her parents. She had planned to be a homemaker after marriage, so she had already quit her job. So now their income is just the pensions of Linda and my father-in-law. Knowing them, they probably don't have much savings. But the land where their house stands is quite spacious, so I guess selling it could fetch a decent amount. As a result, my in-laws decided to sell their home. Though they moved to a small one-bedroom apartment, for some reason, Linda keeps sending me detailed messages about their situation. Is she trying to guilt me into sending money? I don't feel sorry for them, and when I talked to William, he said it's annoying when they send messages like, "Don't you feel bad for us?" As for William and me, We were engrossed in our new jobs in a new place. William had switched jobs, and I set up a new company, a matchmaking agency. The incident with my in-laws was the catalyst. At the matchmaking agency, it's crucial to vet potential partners and introduce them to suitable matches. Dealing with my in-laws made me realize the importance of family. Even if someone seems perfect, their parents might not be. Having been through it, I believe I offer sound advice to those who come to the agency. Sometimes they may need to be prepared to cut ties with their parents. In fact, almost everyone who found a partner through the agency has thanked me, saying things like, "I'm so glad I joined this agency. I had some non-negotiables, but I realized that if I changed it wasn't a problem." So I talked with my parents, and we agreed that we need some distance in our relationship. In fact, keeping some distance has helped many daughters get along with their mothers. I owe it all to your advice, Mary. Many have told me. Yet while we're busy with our work in this new place, I sometimes wonder about my in-laws. I occasionally feel curious about how much they might be struggling now. But no matter how big their issues might be, we've decided it's none of our business. So I plan to keep their number blocked, and I have no intention of reading any future messages from them. I'm aware that the events at the wedding have had a profound impact on my in-laws, but that's a result of the choices they made. William and I are living the life we chose for ourselves, and we believe that's what matters most. Are you the famous photographer? Are you here for a shoot today? The woman in front of me is staring at me excitedly. It seems she knows that I am a photographer. We met at the beach. Despite playing in the sand with her family of 3, she seems very interested in what I have to say. It's nostalgic to think about my early days as a photographer when people didn't believe me, and I hardly got any interviews. When I told her that I was here for a photo shoot, she offered to be the subject without hiding her excitement. "But can you make sure not to show my child's face?" she said, pointing at a cute little girl. A girl of about 2 or 3 years old is looking at us with her round eyes. Of course. What about the father? When I asked, the father looked pale, darting his eyes around, and gave a non-committal answer. I guess it can't be helped. After all, the other father who is building a sandcastle with the girl is my husband. My name is Monica. I am a 30-year-old freelance photographer. I often get called for school events and weddings in the neighborhood. I capture moments filled with smiles and friendship and convey them through my photos. It's not just about taking pictures. It's about sharing happiness by shaping memories and emotions. Capturing various moments of joy is my job and my passion. But there was an event that suddenly stopped the shudder of my life. My husband Alex was a busy businessman. He was involved in the development of leisure facilities and tourist spots and traveled all over the country. We couldn't spend much time together because of our busy schedules, but the time we did spend together was special. Even if it was just a little time, being with him and seeing his smile supported me. I had no intention of quitting my photography job. We promised to support each other's careers while getting married. Taking that as a cue, I started looking for ways to work from home, even for photography. First, I posted landscape photos and portraits of people who gave permission on social media as a portfolio. By showcasing my work in virtual galleries like online photo exhibitions, not only publishers and peers in the photography industry, but also general users widely interfered, which worked well, and my followers increased rapidly. Since live streaming was possible on social media, I started doing talk shows and explanations about the photos I took and started making money. I share the stories and techniques behind the photos while sharing the photos I took. Communicating through photos is fun and rewarding. I was as active in public relations on social media as I was in going out and taking pictures, and my follower count increased steadily. Alex was still on business trips, so I spent more time with my in-laws, but fortunately, they were interested in my social media activities. I became closer to them by teaching them how to use smartphones and social media, and they often come to see my photos and live broadcasts. Both are very nice people, and even when my husband is on a business trip, I don't feel lonely and spend fulfilling days. However, there was a significant void in our lives. That is, we didn't have children. We took tests many times, But we couldn't have children. Both of us wanted children, so the fact that we couldn't have children for several years after marriage cast a subtle shadow over our relationship. At first, my husband was encouraging and cooperative, but he got tired of the economic burden and the time-consuming hospital visits, and I could see that the distance between our hearts was gradually increasing. It didn't help that the project he was working on was reaching its climax and he was flying all over the country. Traveling all over the country and not returning for 3 or 4 days, it was evident that he was becoming increasingly indifferent to the treatment that seemed to have no end in sight. He was focusing more on his work and showing less consideration for me, knowing that I couldn't conceive. He started talking more about his work, while I felt lonely and tried to understand his busy schedule. However, no matter how much I tried to understand, our feelings did not grow closer. Yesterday I had a meeting with a client, and it seems that a new project is about to start. I think I will be staying overnight for a while, starting next week. My husband informed me of this as he took out dirty clothes from a large suitcase. I had just arrived home, but I quickly started the washing machine. Alex doesn't do laundry, take his clothes to the cleaners, or even wear them more than once. He says this way he won't fail, and it's faster, but I want to save money where I can. What about the hospital? That's impossible. I have to go directly, right? I can't leave work and I need a break next week. I sighed quietly so my husband couldn't hear. I had made a reservation at the hospital, but there was nothing I could do if he said he was going on a business trip. I didn't want to cause trouble for my husband's company, and I was happy that his work was being appreciated. I didn't want to get in the way, but I'm also busy and it's tough. You are also going out for a shoot, right? Let's both do our best at work. Yes, Alex, take care of yourself too. I swallowed my words even though I was casually refused. Maybe Alex doesn't want children anymore, but I was too afraid to ask if that was the case. Should I accept this silently, or should I bring it up indirectly? My indecision was weighing heavily on my mind. I used to be good at capturing people's emotions through my camera, but now I spend my days without noticing my own feelings. I feel like I'm slowly being trapped inside the frame of a photograph. One day I received a letter with a famous resort company's logo on a nice white envelope. It didn't seem like just a direct mail, so I quickly opened the envelope. Inside was a voucher for a luxurious hotel by the sea, worth an amount for 3 people. I wondered why this was sent to me, and I felt a fluttering in my chest and immediately went to my husband. Alex, do you know anything about this? I asked, careful not to sound accusatory or suspicious. Alex stopped reading the newspaper and looked at me. He was expressionless, but he slightly narrowed his eyes and glared at me. I had never been looked at like that before, so I couldn't hide the sinking feeling in my chest. Oh, that? A colleague couldn't make it, so I made the reservation instead, and it was delivered here. The package was delivered here? It's nothing strange, so please return it quickly. He reached out his hand. Without saying anything, I handed over the envelope and voucher, and Alex quickly snatched it. However, when he looked at the addressee, he clearly looked uncomfortable, and then looked back at me. This is addressed to me, right? Please don't open it without my permission, he said. I was taken aback and quickly apologized. However, my husband, who works in sales, often receives various direct mails as a greeting. I was surprised that he was upset because I had been casually disposing of the ones that came to the house. I'm sorry, I didn't know it was a direct mail, so I just checked. Since I'm here today, you could have asked me, right? Alex took the envelope to his room, and I couldn't inquire any further about the ticket. I was a little unconvinced about why he needed to book a ticket for his colleague, but I had no choice but to accept Alex's explanation. However, less than half a month later, another incident occurred. It was April, just before the long weekend, and there was a memorial service scheduled at my in-laws' house, but suddenly Alex said he had to go on a long business trip. I was initially at a loss for words. A business trip during the long weekend? I thought to myself, in my line of work, I often receive requests from families for landscape photos, but I had already taken time off for the memorial service. Not just for freelancers, but generally companies are supposed to be off during the long weekends. At least Alex's company usually is. Alex shrugged his shoulders lightly and made a forced smile. It just came up all of a sudden. I have to work on my day off. Can't be helped, right? He said. So, could you attend the memorial service in my place? I knew he took pride in his work and was seriously committed to his career even before we got married. But there were increasing moments when work or business trips felt like a thorn in my side. In the end, he packed his favorite suitcase and left for work. My in-laws were informed at the last minute, and although they were angry with his attitude, they were considerate enough not to make me feel uncomfortable. I'm sorry we made plans and he couldn't make it. I'll give Alex a piece of my mind next time I see him, my mother-in-law said. But all I could do was force a smile. We were supposed to stay for a few days after the memorial service. Alex is the only child of my in-laws, and they would be lonely if we left right away. So I ended up staying with them until after the long weekend as originally planned. I took photos of my in-laws' daily lives and scenes I usually wouldn't with the camera I brought. I passed the time by planning photo shoots, but deep down I felt the absence of Alex, who was supposed to be there. To change my mood and for work, I decided to go to the beach one station away. Everywhere you looked, families were enjoying their outings. People were also enjoying walks and sunbathing under colorful beach parasols. I walked along the beach with my camera. Suddenly I spotted a family building a sandcastle. I stopped in my tracks when I heard a familiar voice. I was glad I wasn't holding my camera, as I would have surely dropped it at the sight before me. In the circle was Alex, building a sandcastle with a young woman and a toddler. They looked like a close-knit family gathering white sand and seashells, and I couldn't believe my eyes. But the hotel vouchers that arrived at our house, the frequency of his sudden long business trips, his indifference, everything piled up like sand in front of me. If this was a commissioned work, it would be an ideal family scene worth capturing multiple times. Even though my husband was right there, I couldn't believe it. The child there must have been a 2 or 3-year-old girl. It closely resembled the time when I started feeling Alex drifting away. My husband already had another family. I don't know if it was my intuition as a wife, but I realized that there was a blood connection between that little girl and my husband. The glass frame in my heart shattered mercilessly. The photo that was supposed to be displayed in that frame was filled with happy smiles of us as a couple. I made up my mind and approached the woman, not Alex, who was playing with the toddler. The woman, wearing a large straw hat, looked surprised at my sudden approach. Somehow I managed to smile and apologize for speaking to her out of the blue. Then I handed her my business card and told her I was a freelance photographer. Only my professional name is listed on the card, but my contact information on social media is also there. She seemed interested in the card and began to search for me on her smartphone. On the other side, Alex, who had definitely noticed me, was staring at a point on the sandy beach as if frozen. If you don't mind, could I take a photo of your family? I sometimes do live broadcasts where I share photography tips. Wow, you're Monica. I follow you. You post tips on smartphone photography, right? Unaware of my relationship with Alex, she was delighted to be approached by a minor celebrity on social media. It was surprising that she was a follower, but she seemed enthusiastic, not only about the photo shoot, but also about the live broadcast. I boldly invited her, and even before I could finish my sentence, she excitedly agreed. I felt guilty for deceiving her, but my goal was to somehow document Alex's other family. Can you teach us some photography tips for moms? I'm good, said Alex, clearly in a panic. He was obviously trying hard not to look at me and thinking desperately for an excuse. No, maybe we shouldn't? Like showing faces. But I do model for pamphlets. Oh, can we make sure not to show the child? I later found out that the woman he was cheating with was a model named Nancy, whom he met through his company's public relations. Of course, I agreed and adjusted my smartphone camera so that the child wouldn't be in the frame. I prepared the environment for immediate streaming and started the live broadcast as if I were teaching other mothers. Since the child wasn't on screen, Alex was the center of attention. His strained smile was interpreted positively by the viewers, and soon comments about the cute, nervous dad started to spread. After ending the live broadcast, I thanked him and left the scene. However, within a few minutes, Alex chased me down and stopped me. He left Nancy and the child behind. I asked him, "What are you trying to do?" But he remained silent, seemingly sulking. Probably feeling awkward with Nancy, he decided to escape to me. I wonder what he was planning to do by stopping me. Finally, he opened his mouth heavily. "Please understand," he said. He didn't explain anything. What does he expect me to understand? Well, I can see it, though. It couldn't be helped, right? I had a child with her before you and I had one. It's okay. Nancy's family is rich, and she says we don't need to get married. Alex, becoming defiant, finally confessed the truth. It's hard to believe that a young woman who got pregnant would say something so convenient. Probably Nancy realized that he was already married. I really wanted kids, you know. But you can't have them. Nancy is straightforward and a good girl, and the child looks so much like Nancy, she's incredibly cute. But it's not that I started to dislike you or didn't want to live together anymore, Alex rambled incoherently, leaving me with no choice but to hold my aching head. Apparently, he is insisting on continuing life as it is now. I won't cause you any trouble. This situation is perfect for me. Isn't it fine like this? I should have argued that it's not fine at all. However, I felt so suffocated that I couldn't speak. In front of my silence, he seemed to feel as if he had persuaded me, and with a somewhat triumphant sigh, he tried to leave. But then unexpectedly, two people rushed over. It was my in-laws. "What's going on? Who is that woman and child?" My father-in-law, his face red with anger, shouted. Alex flinched and was surprised by the sudden appearance of his parents. "Parents? Why? We saw it on the live broadcast notification. Who said you were on a long business trip? You didn't even come home, and now there's an unknown woman and child." My mother-in-law stepped in between us to protect me and scolded Alex fiercely. I was also surprised. They had seen the live broadcast on social media and realized that something serious was happening. They were shocked to see Alex, who appeared to be a couple with an unknown woman, and hurriedly drove over. Being questioned by his parents, he had no choice but to confess everything about his relationship with Nancy and the child. He received a strong slap from his mother, who called him a disgraceful son. My father-in-law glared at my husband with such a terrifying expression that I thought he might have punched him with his fist if my mother-in-law hadn't slapped him. My in-laws took me away, leaving Alex behind. Later, with their apologies and strong encouragement, I decided to get a divorce. Alex and his mistress, Nancy, had a thorough discussion about their affair, and I received compensation for the emotional damage caused by them, which seemed to settle the matter temporarily. However, as I hired a lawyer and started divorce proceedings, various facts came to light. First, Nancy was fully aware that Alex was married. The fact that she got pregnant, was understanding, and even said it was not necessary to get married, indicates that she was somewhat prepared to be in a relationship with a married man. She probably didn't bring up any issues not only because of money, but also because she wanted to keep him as long as possible. On the other hand, she seemed genuinely unaware that I was the other person involved. When she found out that I was the one she had been following on social media, she was outraged and blocked me on all my accounts. Not only that, but she also started defensively posting on various message boards, which ironically only made it public that she was the mistress, causing me to receive an outpouring of sympathy. She apparently also caused trouble at her parents' house because of the child she had with a married man. Being kicked out and almost losing her home, she audaciously thought about moving into my in-laws' house, which of course they firmly refused. Next, more secrets about Alex started to surface. As I continued the investigation for the compensation claim, it turned out that there were countless women around him. In fact, he had been having affairs every time he went on a business trip, and there were multiple mistresses with whom he had relations several times. Some of these mistresses were found to be engaged or married. I decided to send the data of the live stream in question. A little investigation would reveal that I, the legal wife, was the one broadcasting, and the people shown were Alex's mistress and their child. As a result, the women who were deceived into thinking he was single, and the husbands who had their trust betrayed, were able to see the truth. Husbands who had their wives stolen were enraged and stormed Alex's place. He faced lawsuits from all directions, including me, and had no choice but to accept them all. As more and more new facts came to light, Nancy unexpectedly took the child and ran away. She probably chose to escape from her relationship with Alex out of disgust. The uproar Nancy caused on social media eventually died down and her account disappeared, so I decided to let her go. However, considering her character, which proudly posted about the affair on social media, it was unlikely that she would just disappear after deleting her account. As expected, Nancy started using a completely different account. However, she kept posting as if she were the victim of a tragedy, which led to her being easily identified and receiving backlash. After that, whenever things got tough, she would delete her account and create another one, reviving herself like a phoenix. Even Nancy abandoned Alex, who in the end seemed to have planned to rely on my parents-in-law. However, when they found out that he had multiple mistresses, they were even more furious. Without apologizing to anyone, he just clung to them for help out of desperation, which led my in-laws to make the decision to cut ties with their son. After the affair scandal, my husband was left with a considerable amount of compensation to pay. As legal proceedings progressed, inquiries from the mistresses and their husbands started flooding the company, complicating the situation even further. Moreover, this was not the worst outcome. The unprecedented scandal of exposing the child with the mistress on social media spread rapidly during a business trip. And the reviews of the company's related facilities were filled with comments of shock and anger. The loss of trust due to the backlash spread both internally and externally, prompting the management to urgently implement countermeasures. However, since they were not familiar with handling online backlash, they were forced to hastily consult with experts and create a communication strategy. On the other hand, they were also working hard to provide accurate information to the employees and bring an end to the confusion. In the wake of this online scandal, a lot of inquiries and criticisms came from both inside and outside the company, and Alex's reputation plummeted rapidly. He became someone to be avoided at work, completely isolated within the company. In the uncomfortable atmosphere, the company quickly wished for his resignation, and Alex had to look for a new job. Technically, he was always able to do his job without any problems, and he had a good track record in sales. He was liked by the older generation who do not use social media, and he was quickly blessed with a new job. However, a person's basic nature does not change. Within half a year, he seemed to be a different person. He seems to have caused one trouble after another, such as making a pass at the director's wife, or trying to expense the cost of a hotel he used on a business trip. He got fired, joined a new place, caused chaos in relationships there, got fired again, and now he seems to be in a loop of getting kicked out everywhere and moving from one church to another. On the other hand, even after the divorce, I still have a relationship with my ex-in-laws. They were always considerate, which has allowed me to live a peaceful life. The fact that I could end my relationship with Alex and start anew is all thanks to the support of my former in-laws. After the divorce for a while, I found it painful to even take pictures of children. Although my ex-in-laws must have felt betrayed and hurt by their son, they made a conscious effort to show a harmonious front and support me. They made a lot of effort to help me believe once again that my relationship with Alex was not everything about our marriage. One day, I took a photo of my ex-in-laws having a calm conversation. I plan to make this photo the main feature of my upcoming online exhibition. They were quite embarrassed, but I think they will be happy in the end. Bob quickly stuffed his smartphone into his jacket pocket. Then suddenly Lily said to Bob with a serious face, "Bob, why did you bury the baby in the mountain?" Hearing this, both I and Natalie stopped our conversation and looked at Lily, stunned. "What?" Bob's face turned pale. Bob answered flustered, "The baby I saw on your phone earlier," Lily said with a stern expression. "Show me the photos on your phone again." Prompted by Lily, Bob opened his photo album and showed pictures from their recent camping trip. Not this one. Saying so, Lily quickly grabbed the smartphone from Bob's hand and swiped the screen. In an instant, Bob exclaimed, "Oh," and tried to take his phone back. Dodging Bob's attempt, Lily turned the phone screen to me and Natalie to show them the picture. It was a photo of an unfamiliar young woman. She approached me first. She said she was having work issues and wanted some advice. Bob insisted he was just accompanying her because she asked him to. Thanks to Lily's mysterious ability, I came to know about Bob's hidden side. The reason Bob was coming home late and constantly looking at his phone late at night was this. I made Bob guide me to the mountain where the baby was buried. Holding the unearthed baby, I was heading to Bob's workplace a few days later. My name is Shelby Roberts. I'm 29 years old. I've been married to Bob for exactly a year now. Bob is a salaried worker like me and is also 29. I also work a full-time job and spend my days quite busy. My husband and I don't have any kids yet. I met Bob through a friend's introduction. After dating for several years, we got married last year. The wedding was truly touching. Bob helps with the household chores. He even cooks dinner once in a while. He's the perfect husband in my eyes. Marrying him, I felt truly blessed. About 20 minutes drive from our apartment, my older sister Natalie lives. Natalie is 3 years older than me and is already married with a 5-year-old daughter named Lily. Natalie and her family purchased a house where the three of them live. I adore my niece Lily. Lily affectionately calls me Aunt Shelby and is very fond of me. Once when I visited my sister's house, Lily suddenly told me, "Hey, when I was in Mommy's belly, I remember hearing your voice." Huh? I was genuinely taken aback. "Do you remember being in Mom's belly, Lily?" I asked. "I heard Dad's voice too," Lily replied with a serious face. "I've heard of kids having memories from the womb, but this was the first time someone told me directly about it." When I told Natalie about this, she said, "Yeah, every now and then Lily mentions things from when she was inside me. I never knew kids could remember such things." Impressed, Natalie shared more with me. "That's not all. Sometimes when I can't find something, she tells me where it is. And it's not like she saw me put it there. But whenever I look where Lily tells me to, I always find it there." "That's amazing," I exclaimed. "I can't quite put my finger on it, but Lily seems to have some sort of special gift," Natalie said, looking at me earnestly. A little way off, Lily was innocently playing with her teddy bear. It made me wonder if young children might have some sort of unique power. As these thoughts crossed my mind, I gazed at Lily. Sometime later, Bob started coming home later and later. At first, I figured work must be tough, but lately, he'd often come home after midnight. I began to worry. Late one night, as Bob hurriedly headed for the shower, I called out, "Bob, you've been working late a lot, huh?" "Yeah, the boss just won't let me leave on time," Bob replied. With that, he quickly shut the door behind him and went into the bathroom. About 5 minutes later, Bob came out. I offered him the dinner I had prepared, but he replied, "Sorry, I'm just too tired to eat." "Well, I'm gonna head to bed then." "Good night," I said. It was already quite late, and I figured Bob would join me in the bedroom soon, given how tired he claimed to be. But an hour passed and he still hadn't come to bed. 2 passed and he didn't come. Feeling restless, I quietly walked out to peek into the living room. In the dimly lit room, Bob was seated on the couch, engrossed in his smartphone. From the movement of his fingers, it looked like he was texting someone. And he had a big grin on his face. Why was he so happy, especially after such a long day? Was he messaging someone? And if so, who? My heart filled with anxiety. Lacking the courage to confront Bob, I returned to the bedroom. "Hey Bob, how about we go camping during the upcoming long weekend?" I brought up the idea one day. Although we were newlyweds, we hadn't gone out anywhere lately. Until not long ago, we'd spend our weekends going to the movies or visiting amusement parks. I wanted to go to the mountains with Bob and spend some quality time together. There's this campsite in the mountains. We could set up a tent, have a barbecue, and at night, look at the stars. Sounds fun, right? Bob didn't seem too excited, but I really wanted to go. I believed he'd enjoy it once we got there. Alright, fine. But what about the car? Ours isn't big enough for all the camping gear. When Bob mentioned that, I decided to consult Natalie. One day, I visited Natalie's place alone and asked her about the car situation. "You can borrow our van, and feel free to use our tent too." Natalie happily offered. Her van was big and suited for mountain roads, with ample space for our gear. I thanked Natalie for her kindness. "Thanks, you're a lifesaver. Let's take some time and relax together as a couple. It's been a while." While I was talking with Natalie, Lily overheard and chimed in. "Are you guys going camping? I wish I could go." "That'd be nice. We should go with Lily next time." The day before our camping trip finally arrived, and I borrowed a car from Natalie's house and drove it home. The next day, Bob and I headed out in that car for a 3-day, 2-night camping adventure. Breathing in the fresh air, surrounded by nature, I felt truly rejuvenated. Bob seemed to be enjoying himself more than usual, with a big smile on his face. I'm really glad we decided to head to the mountains, even if it took a bit of convincing. I thought to myself as I chatted with Bob. But late that night, Bob, who was sleeping next to me, got up quietly and started using his smartphone. I pretended to be asleep. He spent about 2 hours on his phone. It seemed like he was texting someone. The same thing happened the next night. Then on the 3rd day we returned home from the campsite. It was around 4 p.m. "When are we supposed to return this car?" Natalie said, "If we bring it back tomorrow, it'll be fine." As I responded, Bob's excitement was evident. "So can I take the car out for a bit?" "No?" I was surprised. We had just come back from camping, and he wanted to go out again. I wanted to invite some local buddies and try out a big car like this. "You're not gonna drink, right?" "I promise no drinking." "When will you be back?" "I'll make sure to be home before midnight. We're on vacation. It's okay once in a while, right?" After some persuasion from Bob, I reluctantly agreed. Whistling a cheerful tune, Bob hopped into the car and left in high spirits. Even if they were local buddies, I wondered if they would all be available on such short notice. While pondering this, I spent a lonely evening at home. Just a few minutes before midnight, Bob came back. "See, I made it home before midnight and I didn't drink," Bob said immediately upon returning. Then he quickly took out his smartphone and started checking it again. "Bob, you've been on your phone a lot lately," I said with a hint of annoyance. "I'm just texting the friends I was with earlier." Saying this, Bob took his smartphone to the bathroom. The next day, Bob and I went to Natalie's house to return the car and tent. When we gave them some snacks we bought near the campsite as a thank you gift, Lily was delighted. Natalie invited Bob and me inside and made us coffee. Lily had become quite fond of Bob as they had met several times. Since Natalie referred to Bob as Mr. Bob, Lily had also started calling him that. Lily and Bob were sitting on the couch playing together, with Bob responding with a warm smile. Soon after, Lily requested to see the photos Bob had taken during the camping trip on his smartphone. While Natalie and I were chatting, she asked, "How was the camping? Did you have fun?" "Yes, it was great. Thanks for the car and tent, they were a huge help." Suddenly, Bob said in a loud voice to Lily, "Don't touch it without permission." As he quickly took his smartphone away from Lily, she seemed to have fiddled with the smartphone. "Nah, you can't touch things without asking," Natalie gently reprimanded Lily. I wanted to see more of Bob's photos," Lily said with a pout. Bob hurriedly put his phone back in his pocket. Suddenly, Lily said seriously to Bob, "Bob, why did you bury the baby in the mountain?" Hearing this, both Natalie and I stopped talking and stared at Lily in surprise. Bob's face turned pale as a ghost. Stammering, Bob responded, "What are you talking about?" "The baby I saw on your phone earlier," Lily said with a serious look. "Bob, show me the pictures on your phone again." Prompted by Lily, Bob opened his photo gallery to display camping photos. "Not this one," Lily responded swiftly, taking the phone from Bob and swiping the screen. Bob, taken aback, exclaimed, "Oh," and tried to snatch his phone back quickly, avoiding Lily's grab. Lily showed Natalie and me the phone screen. A picture displayed an unfamiliar young woman. She was holding a large baby doll plush, grinning widely. In the background was a claw machine. It seemed the photo was taken in an arcade. Presumably, the stuffed doll was a prize she won from the claw machine. "Who's this?" I asked in a low voice. Looking panicked, Bob tried to retrieve the phone from Lily. Just then, Lily handed the phone to me, and as I swiped, a photo of Bob and the young woman taking a selfie while closely hugging each other appeared. Swiping again revealed another picture of Bob and the woman lying side by side. Apparently they were in a car. Upon closer inspection, the car's interior matched the one Natalie had lent out. The seats were flattened, and it seemed the two were lying down taking pictures. Bob's eyes darted left and right. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Natalie looked at me with concern. Just then, our brother-in-law returning from work entered. I wanted to immediately confront Bob about the woman in the photos. However, I couldn't do it in front of Lily and our brother-in-law. Thankfully, Natalie suggested that she take care of Lily with the help of our brother-in-law and that we should move to another room. Bob, Natalie, and I went upstairs, closed the door, and continued the conversation. Who's the woman in the pictures? Bob was reluctant to speak. However, after persistent questioning from Natalie and me, Bob finally admitted. The woman in the photo was a co-worker named Jane Smith. She's 23. She had joined his workplace as a new recruit this spring. Bob had been cheating on me with this woman. I felt like I was about to pass out. She was the one who approached me. She said she was having trouble at work and wanted to talk. Bob tried to explain. Bob, can you show us what kind of messages you exchanged with this Jane? Natalie suddenly asked. I can't really do that, Bob exclaimed in distress. If there was infidelity, I want to see the evidence as your sister-in-law. Of course, Shelby should know as well, Natalie argued. Bob was adamant about not showing his phone, but after Natalie's strong persuasion, he reluctantly handed it over to her. When Natalie looked at Bob's phone, there were a ton of conversations with Jane. The two whispered sweet nothings to each other multiple times a day. One day I was shocked to read their messages. It was a message from late at night when Bob went out with the car he borrowed from Natalie. Today was fun. It was only for a short time. But I'm glad I got to see you, Jane. I was so happy to get cozy with you in such a big car. I only snuck out of the house today just for that. Bob, when are you gonna get divorced from your wife? Try to do it soon. Someday if we can get married, you'll give birth to my child, won't you, Jane? Yes, I trust you, and will wait for you. I was stunned and frozen from shock after reading this. What's this? Bob was sweating profusely, looking extremely uncomfortable. Bob, tell me everything. Bob, realizing he couldn't escape the situation, started to confess in detail. Jane had approached Bob for advice and they started going out for meals. Bob drove Jane home since it was late. She still lived with her parents, so they couldn't go to her house. Instead, they would park the car in a nearby park and talk until late. Eventually, they became intimate. The times Bob claimed to be working late, he was actually out on dates with Jane. One day, after coming back from camping, he wanted to go on a drive date, using the car he borrowed from Natalie. Bob lied to me, met up with Jane, and they enjoyed their drive. They stopped at an arcade on the way. Upon Jane's insistence, Bob won a large baby plush toy from a claw machine. It's like we're a married couple with a baby, Jane exclaimed joyfully, holding the plush. They decided to bury the plush toy in the mountain like a time capsule and promised to dig it up once they got married to remember the day. They placed the toy in a large plastic bag and buried it in the mountain behind the park where they often parked to get cozy. Since we had just returned from camping, there was a shovel in the car, which was convenient for them. What's that all about? I was disgusted to hear the story. Natalie, sitting next to me, was at a loss for words, frowning. Burying a baby plush in the mountains is creepy, she said. And what's more heartbreaking is that they've already made promises to get married. Bob even told Jane, if we ever get married, you'll give birth to my child. Bob kept emphasizing that Jane was the one who initiated things, but his comments also fueled the flame. This hurt me even more. We've been married for only a year, and we don't have children yet. Meanwhile, Bob is making promises of marriage with a young co-worker and even thinking about having a baby with her. I broke down crying in front of Bob and Natalie. Natalie comforted me while Bob looked around nervously. But it's strange. How did Lily know just by looking at the picture that Bob buried a baby plush in the mountains? After crying my heart out, I muttered, maybe that child has some mysterious powers, Natalie agreed. Bob looked puzzled. But he didn't have the courage to ask Natalie and me for details, and once again looked defeated. It was getting late, so Bob and I returned to our apartment. Once home, Bob and I sat down to continue our conversation. We've only been married for a year, and you have the audacity to betray me like this? I glared at Bob and exclaimed, I'm sorry, but really, if she hadn't tempted me, I wouldn't have done this. You have some nerve saying that. You are clearly enjoying yourself with that young woman. Furious with Bob's excuses, I lashed out at him. Bob, you're terrible, but that Jane girl is just as bad. She knew you were married. Well, she's been having a hard time at work and struggling. I was flabbergasted by Bob's attempt to defend Jane. So because she seemed troubled, you thought you'd console her and get all cozy in your car? I've been concerned for a while. You've been coming home late, and I've noticed you on your phone until the early hours. I pretended to be asleep, but I knew you were constantly texting someone, I said loudly to Bob. He looked down, remaining silent. For starters, I'm telling my parents and yours about this. When I said this, Bob started to panic. It's only right to tell our parents. My sister already knows, so I can't keep this a secret. I exposed Bob's affair to both our parents. Soon, both sets of parents stormed into our home berating Bob. How dare you have an affair just a year into your marriage? Shelby deserves better. What were your wedding vows? You promised to make our daughter happy, but you betrayed her so easily. My parents vehemently rebuked Bob. Even more so, Bob's parents were livid. We never thought you'd be such a disgrace. You're the shame of the Roberts family. That's right. Don't even think about coming home. More importantly, we're so sorry, Shelby, to think you're still newlyweds. It's utterly embarrassing having a son like this. Bob's parents then apologized to me again. Hey, what are you waiting for? Bob apologized too. I'm truly sorry. With tears streaming down his face, Bob said this after being berated by both sets of parents. You have a wonderful wife like Shelby, and yet you do this. We're cutting ties with you, Bob. Got it? After being thoroughly scolded and everyone left, Bob collapsed on the floor. Bob, I want a divorce, I stated firmly. You probably want to marry Jane and have kids with her. I'll gladly divorce someone like you. I admit I texted about marriage and kids, but that wasn't my real intention. I just wanted to make her happy in the moment. The one I truly love is you, Shelby. That? Hearing that just made me dislike you even more. I said coldly, leaving Bob with a bewildered look. There's no way I would be swayed by such words. I can't trust you anymore. I want a divorce. Please reconsider. I never really wanted to marry Jane. It was just a fling. Bob, having betrayed me, was now desperately trying to make amends. Can you show me where you buried the baby doll? The long weekend ended and it was Bob's day to go to work. I had to work too, but I took the day off. Excuse me, my husband works here. Thank you for always taking care of him. I loudly greeted everyone as I entered the office building. That was Bob's workplace. Everyone there was staring at me, completely taken aback. No wonder, as I was holding a stuffed baby toy covered in dirt. The sight was so bizarre that the employees were frozen in shock with wide eyes. Every step I took, dirt from the stuffed toy fell onto the office floor. Bob, his face ashen, hurriedly approached me. Yesterday, I had Bob guide me to the mountain where the stuffed toy was buried. And in front of me, I had him dig up that stuffed baby toy. The toy was in a large bag, but as we dug it up with a shovel, the bag tore, getting the toy dirty. Last night I had thought of using this toy somehow to take revenge on the two of them. And what I came up with was this plan to barge into the office holding this dirt-covered stuffed baby toy. Bob, never expecting me to show up at the office with the toy, seemed utterly panicked. My husband has been having an affair with a junior colleague, Jane, I said. Upon saying this, all the employees focused their attention on one woman. It was Jane, Bob's affair partner. Jane, like Bob, turned pale and looked down in sheer embarrassment. He told me that they would bury this stuffed toy until they got married, and once their dream came true, they would dig it up together. I said, I could hear whispers of disbelief from the employees saying things like, "No way. That's so creepy and sounds like a horror story." But what I don't get is why he would tell me something like this while he's cheating on me with Jane. I said and then played a video on my phone. Bob's voice echoed loudly. Please reconsider. I never really intended to marry her. She was just a fling. After the video finished playing, Jane, who had been looking down just moments before, sharply raised her head, her expression filled with fury. Just a fling? Bob, what does that mean? She demanded. No, it's not like that, Bob stammered at a loss for words. You promised to break up with your wife and marry me. You even said you wanted me to have your baby, Jane yelled. The employees were once again shocked by her words, and a commotion broke out. Here you go, I said as I handed the dirt-covered stuffed baby toy to Jane. Then I handed Bob a business card for a divorce attorney. We're getting divorced. From now on, let's communicate through the attorney. Overwhelmed by my determination, Bob silently took the card. I apologize for the commotion, everyone. I've finished my business here, so I'll be on my way, I said to Bob and Jane. I wish you too, all the happiness. With that, I left Bob's office and brushed the dirt off my clothes as I walked away. Later, I heard that both Bob and Jane confessed to their affair when questioned by their superiors. Concerned about the company's image, they were both promptly fired. Jane was furious upon being called just a fling. She transitioned from a timid new employee to a woman filled with rage. After I moved out of our shared apartment, Jane forcefully moved in with Bob. Bob was threatened by Jane, saying, "You never know what I might do." He had no choice but to do as she said. Bob was fired from his job and tried to find another, but Jane forbade him from talking to other women. Bob was fed up with Jane, but given her unpredictable nature, he reluctantly complied. Bob ended up working at a construction site with only men, putting in hard labor every day. Jane took away Bob's freedom, constantly checking his smartphone as if monitoring him. She probably feared someone else would snatch Bob from her, just as she had done. Not only was Bob burdened with paying the rent for the apartment and living expenses, but he was also pressed with paying me compensation for the emotional distress he caused. I had also demanded compensation from Jane for the same reasons. She seemed to have started working multiple part-time jobs, but she kept getting fired, hopping from one job to the next. The lawyer who helped with the compensation issue had a chance to meet with Bob. That's when he learned about the miserable life of Bob and Jane and reported back to me. After the divorce, I moved back to my parents' home. My workplace was within commuting distance from home, so I continued with my job as before. Living at home meant I had many more opportunities to see not just my parents, but also Natalie and Lily. Natalie genuinely sympathized with me, offering words of comfort. Encouragement. Shelby, you've been through a lot. You're still young. You'll surely find someone better. I hope so. But thanks to Lily's mysterious power, I was able to part ways with that awful man quickly. I genuinely felt that way. It was a silver lining that I got divorced from such a man so quickly. I felt like Lily, with her mysterious power, was a lifesaver. I hope to someday meet an honest man and get married. And I'd like to have and raise children. For that time, I'm gonna work hard and save money now. With such thoughts, I'm living each day with a positive attitude. Mom. In shock, I opened my eyes wide and looked down at my daughter, Emily. It was the first time she had called me Mom. Emily, my husband's daughter from his previous marriage, hadn't warmed up to me at all this past year. But now she called me for the first time. I was on the verge of tears when she reached out her right hand to me. In her open palm was a ring. Upon closer inspection, it was a wedding ring. It looked like it was sized for a woman. As Emily, the child I didn't give birth to, lowered her gaze and trembled, I knelt down beside her. It's from your real mom. Do you want to meet her? My husband was on a business trip abroad. Feeling lonely with just the two of us, I gently asked her. No, I want you to throw it away. Huh? Well, as I listened to Emily's story, I felt anger building up inside me. I should leave, right? I tightly hugged my 10-year-old daughter, who came to such a conclusion. Stroking Emily's crying head, I whispered, "Tell that person tomorrow that I'll do as she wishes. I won't forgive anyone who makes my daughter cry. They'll get what they deserve." My name is Catherine, 29 years old. I got married last year, and am currently a stay-at-home mom. My husband Bob is 37, and it's a second marriage for both of us. We met at work. Excluding the fact that the company was owned by my father, we had a typical senior-junior relationship. By the time I joined the company, he had already divorced his previous wife. But he was a very reliable senior. Emily, Bob's daughter, is 10. Even after being married to Bob for a year, she hadn't warmed up to me at all. Emily would answer when I asked something. She would eat all her meals without leaving anything. But she never initiated a conversation with me or talked about school or friends. I understand it's a tricky age and maybe that's just how it is, but I couldn't help but feel lonely. I heard that the relationship between Emily's real mother Linda and Bob was not good. Linda was a heavy drinker and had multiple affairs. If it weren't for Emily, Bob said they would have divorced sooner. There were times when Bob would come home late at night and find the house empty. It was said that once or twice a kindergarten-aged Emily was left alone crying. Because of this, they often had marital disputes. Emily apparently saw all of this and kept saying through her tears, "I don't want you guys to split up." Back then, Emily really had it tough. That's what Bob said. Indeed, she was left alone at home, feeling lonely and scared, crying, and then hearing her parents argue because of it. It was probably a time when she needed her mom's affection the most. Every day, she should have been playing, laughing with her friends, unconditionally loved by her mom and dad, and going to bed happy. When she was in kindergarten, those should have been her days. I wanted to tell Linda straight to her face that she was a failure as a mother. The day Emily started second grade, Linda disappeared, leaving only a divorce paper with a ring and signature on the table. The breakfast dishes were still dirty, and the laundry wasn't done either. Emily probably didn't even understand what a divorce paper was. Thinking about how Emily felt waiting for her mother in such a situation broke my heart. For a year after that, Bob raised Emily on his own. Before that, Bob, being my senior, had often taught me and helped me with my work, so I thought it was my turn to help him out, taking on some of his tasks and working late with him so he could get home earlier. But I wasn't the only one. Everyone supported Bob because he was competent and had a kind personality. When the school called because Emily had a fever, I was the one who made a fuss. "Please go home to her. So sad she's sick." "Well, I have a meeting in the afternoon. At least I want to make an apology call to them first." "Boss, can you go home right away?" "I can make the apology call." My voice echoed down the corridor. "I'll explain it to them." My dad, who happened to be passing by, let Bob go home immediately. After work, I visited Emily, and that incident brought Bob and me closer than ever before. My parents, who knew about Bob's reputation and character at the company, didn't object to our marriage, even though he was divorced. I consider Emily as my real family. Contrary to my feelings, even a year after our marriage, Emily hadn't warmed up to me. But on the night Bob left for an international business trip, Emily spoke to me. "Mom, actually, I stopped cooking and turned around." I looked down at Emily in disbelief. She finally called me for the first time. At the same time, I felt my vision blur. My vision blurred. On the verge of tears, I sniffed and looked at Emily's outstretched right hand. On her palm was a small ring. Upon closer inspection, I realized it was a wedding ring, most likely belonging to a woman. It was my biological mother's. I wiped my hands on my apron and crouched down. Even though she was a terrible mother, she might still be important to Emily. Bob was away on a business trip. I thought Emily might be feeling lonely with just me, a stranger, so I gently asked, "Do you want to see your real mom?" But Emily shook her head and said, "I want you to throw this away." Confused by her sudden request, I asked, "Why?" "I met my mom yesterday," Emily continued. "Yesterday? After school?" I asked. "Not just yesterday. Several times on my way home she was there, asking about my new mom. Even if I said I didn't know, she kept asking." "That me?" I wondered why. Did she want to confirm her last bit of maternal love and whether her daughter was being treated well? But my thoughts were completely overturned. "My mom said your new mom is pretty wealthy." "Huh? I heard she's the daughter of the CEO where your dad works." Chills ran down my spine. I felt an overwhelming revulsion. "Weren't you told anything else?" "My mom met with my dad. She told my dad to either send me over or bring money. But it seems like Dad doesn't have much money. Mom said she's gonna talk to my new mom next. She told me to throw a fit and say, I don't want to go to her place." Tears streamed down Emily's face. I felt a wave of anger rising within me. Should I leave? I asked myself. I embraced my 10-year-old daughter, who had come to such a heartbreaking conclusion. Stroking Emily's tear-streaked face, I whispered, "Tell her tomorrow that you'll do as she wishes." I can't accept someone like that as a mother. She made my daughter cry, and she's gonna pay for it. That night, after Emily was asleep, I called Bob. I confirmed what Emily had told me earlier. "It's true. I didn't tell you, Catherine, because I didn't want to worry you." But ambushing Emily? I didn't know about that either. It was news to me. However, I did ask Emily if she wanted to live with her mom. Even though she's no good, she's Emily's real mom. But Emily said she didn't want to. She wants to continue living here. But it seems Linda has been visiting her quite a few times. Bob's anger was palpable even over the phone. I understood his feelings entirely. "Anyway, on the next school holiday, I'm gonna meet with Linda along with Emily," I told him. Bob responded with urgency in his voice. Can you wait until I return from my trip?" "No, I can't." She made Emily cry. "I can't stay quiet any longer." I reassured Bob, saying, "Don't worry," then hung up. The next day, as I was tidying my room, Emily came home from school. "How was it today? Did she show up? Did you give her the note?" "Yes," she said, "to make sure I'm there at 10 a.m. on Saturday." "Alright, thank you." The note I gave her specified to meet at a coffee shop on a school-free Saturday. I bet Linda believes she's going to get money without any suspicion. Seeing the sad expression on Emily's face, I suggested, "How about we go buy some new clothes to wear?" "Huh? We gotta dress up nicely. It's gonna be the last time we see her on Saturday." Still looking unsure, I asked Emily one more time, "Are you really okay? Never seeing her again?" "I don't want to see someone who causes trouble for Dad and you," Emily said, her eyes filled with determination. "Well then, wash your hands and have some snacks from the fridge," I instructed, and she happily complied. Watching Emily energetically exclaim "Yep" and dash to the bathroom, I began putting the old books I had taken out back into the paper bag. Emily and I were dressed in clothes that anyone could instantly recognize as high-end brands, heading towards our designated coffee shop. I usually wouldn't pick out such clothes. Whether they're expensive or not, I just want to dress Emily in clothes she looks good in and that she loves. However, today even this serves as a way to challenge the other party. "Alright, Emily, no matter what I or she says, you're gonna trust me, right?" Emily, nodding firmly, had her head gently stroked by me. Holding hands, we confidently walked into the coffee shop. "Oh, Emily, you're wearing such lovely clothes." "It really suits you," Linda, who was already there, said with a big grin on her face. "Sit next to your mother," she instructed. Ignoring Linda's words, Emily chose to sit next to me. Linda's face twitched slightly, but she quickly put on a smile to cover it up. I also smiled and deliberately placed a heavy paper bag and a branded purse right in front of Emily. "There's something precious inside." "Keep an eye on it," I said. The color in Linda's eyes changed. She was greedily staring at the paper bag, probably thinking it contained a luxury purse and money. I ordered a coffee for myself and a cake set for Emily. After introducing ourselves, I quickly brought up the topic. "You want Emily back, huh?" "Yes, indeed. She's such a lovely girl. I just want to raise her on my own," Linda replied. "I see. I heard from Bob that you..." "Catherine, do you truly love Emily like she's your own daughter?" "Of course I do. It breaks my heart to think of taking Emily away from someone like you. So I was thinking maybe you could give me something in return." Pretending not to understand, I tilted my head. Something in return? Like what? You know what I mean." "Sorry, I'm not really familiar with such things." During the ensuing awkward silence, I sipped my coffee. Emily, who had been looking down at her phone since earlier, was gently urged by me to try her cake, saying, "Eat up, it's delicious." Linda clicked her tongue in slight annoyance. After a few moments of silence, she leaned in, seemingly impatient. "I mean money. Just money. Money, you say?" I purposely asked back in a slightly louder voice. Linda frowned and sighed. "Obviously, I'm giving up my precious daughter. I deserve some compensation." I interrupted. "No, I'm a mother too. I know how precious a child can be." I have no intention of snatching Emily away from you, Linda. Linda sat there with her mouth agape. Emily looked surprised, dropping her fork and staring at me. I picked up the fallen fork and handed it back to Emily. She might have felt betrayed. It hurt me to think so, but since Emily had nodded in trust earlier, I decided to trust her as well. What on earth are you talking about? Linda exclaimed. As I said, if both you and Emily wish, I will return Emily to you. I'll even help persuade Bob, I assured. Linda said in disbelief. Hold on a minute, chuckling. She looked over at Emily with an anxious expression. Emily, you don't want to be separated from Catherine and your dad, do you? She said almost accusingly. Emily looked at Linda, then at me, and looked down. Lifting her face, she replied, Either way is fine. Then she dropped her gaze to her smartphone. Are you crazy? Bang! Linda slammed the table. Emily looked up in surprise. Well then I want child support. $10,000. No, that's not enough. Give me $50,000 to start. Linda was desperate. Her patience was running thin, and her true colors were starting to show. I leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms. It's not up to you to decide, Linda. There should be a proper calculation for that. Discuss with Bob about paying more. It's not me who's going to pay, I said firmly. Linda, who thought she'd get the money easily, was getting more and more frustrated. But I kept my cool and stared right back at her. This was just the beginning. I'm going to push her into a corner to ensure she never shows up in front of Emily again. You did tell me through Emily, right? That you'd do as I wished. Yes. You haven't done anything. Your father is a CEO, isn't he? He can afford it? As Linda's voice grew louder, I whispered, People are watching. She looked around and shut her mouth. I exaggeratedly sighed and said, What are you talking about? I checked with you first, right? You wanted to take custody of Emily. You said you wanted to raise her. I agreed to help. Is there a problem? What problem? Linda's lips trembled. I pressed on. Also, Linda, how do you plan to support Emily? Child support is meant for Emily's necessities, not for your luxury, you know? That's ridiculous. Bob left me for a younger woman. Emily, if it comes to that, you'll suffer with me. If you don't want that, beg this woman to pay me. Her desperation was evident. She always lived selfishly, depending on others, never making an effort. It's no wonder she felt betrayed. She had it coming. So, are you saying this even though you have no intention of raising Emily? You want custody just for the money? Linda didn't answer. She just glared at me. I'll harass you until you pay up. I'll go to Emily's school. I'll scream outside your house. I'll make sure everyone knows you took her from me, Linda growled, showing she was beyond caring about appearances. That's enough. I reached out and grabbed a bag in front of Emily. From it I took out a small voice recorder. I turned it off and showed it to Linda. That's a clear threat. And after hearing this, no one would want to give you custody. It's not about whether you have money or not. It's beyond that. Linda jumped up. Damn it! She tried to snatch the recorder from me, but I pulled it away. As she lunged further, a hand from the side grabbed her wrist. Both Linda and I turned to look. Dad! Emily's voice echoed through the restaurant. Bob, why are you here? Linda was shocked. I was curious too. Bob, with a cold look, said to Linda, If you try to harm my wife, I'll sue. I had never seen Bob this assertive before. Daddy, Emily exclaimed, throwing her arms around him. Bob gently patted Emily's head. Although he was supposed to be on an overseas business trip, he was here. When asked why, he laughed and said, How could I not come back during a family crisis? He then turned his gaze back to Linda. You really should realize that as a mother, our daughter no longer accepts you. You're acting in ways that make you despised as a person. Though his voice hinted at anger, Bob spoke calmly. This, however, surely dealt a heavy blow to Linda. Possibly more than any argument I've presented before. After all, while Linda still addresses Bob by his old familiar name, Bob now addresses her more formally and speaks to her with a certain distance. Linda clenched her teeth, looking down, her body quivering with frustration. At least, she began, her voice low and strained. Suddenly, she reached out, pulling a paper bag towards herself. At least let me have this, she said, holding the bag protectively. It's fine, I responded casually. I was actually going to sell these books at a used bookstore later. If you want them, they're yours. At my words, Linda let out a surprised, "Huh?" She checked the contents and quickly pushed them away. "I don't want such dirty old books." This was exactly the reaction I expected from Linda. I couldn't help but sigh internally. "Oh, Emily," I hurriedly picked up the book that had fallen to the floor. I dusted each one off, looking sympathetic, and returned them to the bag. "These books were given to me by your grandpa," I explained. "From Grandpa? Even though he's no longer with us? I thought he'd be okay with giving them away today." "But since Linda doesn't seem to want them, would you like them, Emily?" Emily looked up with a smile. "Yes, I'll cherish and read them." "That's good to hear," I smiled back. "Some of these are first editions, worth thousands of dollars each." The one most taken aback by this was Linda. "What? No way, I'll take the books. You said you'd give them to me, right?" Bob sighed at the sight of Linda standing up. He firmly grabbed her shoulder and made her sit back down. "You never learn, do you? This now belongs to Emily." Linda tried to reason. "Bob, no, Mr. Bob, please convince your wife." "I really need the money." Bob responded, "I don't care. But I will cover the bill for our drinks here." He then turned to me, suggesting that we get ready to leave. Bob turned to Linda once more. "I'll tell you one more time, if you ever harass my wife or daughter again, I will not hesitate to take legal action." After apologizing at the register for the commotion, we left the cafe. It turned out that Bob had requested an urgent return from his overseas business trip. On his business trip, Bob returned urgently. Emily was always fiddling with her smartphone, apparently communicating with Bob. Since that day, Linda never showed up in front of Emily or me. However, after Bob returned from his business trip, Linda did visit him once. Apparently, she couldn't pay her rent and was evicted from her apartment. With worn-out clothes and carrying 2 bags, she pleaded with Bob, saying she only had a few $100s and needed help. Bob refused, advising her to live more responsibly. She cursed him out, but eventually sobbed uncontrollably like a child. After that day, Emily and I became inseparable, like a real mother and daughter. She started helping me prepare dinner and fold the laundry. It wasn't that she felt obligated, she simply enjoyed spending time with me. Above all, we shared countless stories. "Before you and Dad got married, when I had a fever, you came to visit me, didn't you?" "Yes, I had heard about you before, but that was the first time I met you in person." "I always thought how nice it would be if you were my mom," Emily shared. Laughing, I asked, "Then why did you keep your distance?" She admitted she didn't want to get too attached, fearing the eventual separation from Linda. I comforted her, saying, "You didn't have to worry about that. I am your mom now, and I'll always protect you. We'll always talk and depend on each other. Okay? Sure thing." Emily replied with a radiant smile, which made me cherish our bond even more.